This is the inspiring story of Sophia, a 67-year-old woman who faces the ultimate test of character when her estranged son suddenly reappears in her life after 9 years of silence. When her husband's substantial inheritance comes solely to her, she must navigate the complex emotions of betrayal, longing, and the true meaning of family. As she confronts her son's ulterior motives, Sophia embarks on a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and ultimately finding the strength to forge her own path forward. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. I never thought I would be the kind of woman who would become a widow at 67, left alone with an inheritance that most people could only dream of. I also never imagined my only son would abandon me for 9 years, only to return when money entered the equation. But life has a way of surprising you, sometimes cruelly. My name is Sophia Blackwood, and my story begins on a rainy Tuesday morning in April, exactly 3 months after my husband Theodore's funeral. I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at the legal documents spread across the mahogany table that had witnessed 42 years of family meals, arguments, laughter, and tears. Mrs. Blackwood, are you absolutely certain you understand the extent of your husband's estate? Mr. Peterson, Theodore's lawyer and friend of 30 years, asked again, his bushy eyebrows raised in concern. 18 million euros, several properties across Europe, controlling shares in the company, and various investments, I recited, my voice steadier than I felt. Yes, Arthur, I understand perfectly. And you're aware that Theodore left everything to you. Nothing to your son, Maxwell. I nodded, running my fingers over the embossed letterhead of the documents. Theodore and I discussed it thoroughly. He believed I would make the right decisions. Arthur shuffled uncomfortably in his seat. Maxwell might contest the will, given your strained relationship. Strained. What a polite word for complete abandonment. My son hadn't spoken to me in 9 years, not since that horrible Christmas when everything fell apart. Let him try, I said, signing the final document with a flourish. Theodore's wishes were clear. After Arthur left, I moved to the window seat in the library, Theodore's favorite spot. The rain tapped gently against the glass, creating rivulets that distorted the view of my expansive garden. I could almost see Theodore there, pruning his beloved roses, his silver hair catching the sunlight. The house felt too large now, too empty. We had bought it when Maxwell was born, wanting space for him to grow, to run, to be free. Now, at 39, he was somewhere in San Francisco, working as an executive for a tech company, living a life completely separate from mine. I still remembered the day he left, his final words ringing in my ears. You're useless. You've always held me back, always sided with Dad. I'm done with both of you. The argument had been about money, of course. Maxwell had wanted funding for a business venture that Theodore had deemed too risky. I had tried to mediate, but ended up agreeing with my husband. Maxwell had stormed out, and that was the last time I saw my son. 9 years of silence. 9 years of sending birthday cards that received no response. 9 years of checking his social media just to see if he was alive. Well, happy. 9 years of holidays with empty chairs and presents that remained wrapped. I wiped away a tear that had escaped without permission. Pull yourself together, Sophia, I muttered, channeling Theodore's practical voice. There was work to be done, an estate to manage, a life to rebuild. Little did I know that the doorbell would ring exactly 1 week later, bringing with it a face I had both longed for and dreaded seeing again. The rain had continued intermittently throughout the week, matching my melancholy mood. I had begun the arduous task of sorting through Theodore's belongings, a process both painful and cathartic. Each item held memories, his collection of vintage watches, the tweed jackets that smelled faintly of his cologne, the dog-eared books with his notes scribbled in the margins. When the doorbell rang that Wednesday afternoon, I assumed it was another delivery of condolence flowers, or perhaps Arthur with more paperwork. Instead, I opened the door to find Maxwell standing on my doorstep, a cake box in one hand and a folder in the other. Time had changed him. His once boyish face had hardened into a man's, with lines at the corners of his eyes and a slight silver streak in his dark hair, just like his father's. He wore an expensive suit that spoke of success, of a life well lived without us. "Mom," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered. "May I come in?" My heart lurched in my chest, caught between joy at seeing my only child and suspicion at his timing. 9 years of silence, and now he appears, just days after the reading of Theodore's will. But I was raised to be polite, to maintain appearances, so I stepped aside. Of course, Maxwell. He walked into the foyer, his eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. The place hasn't changed much. Some things remain constant, I replied, leading him to the sitting room, my sanctuary of cream-colored sofas and carefully curated art pieces. Unlike people, if he caught my barb, he didn't show it. Instead, he placed the cake box on the coffee table and smiled, that charming smile that had gotten him out of trouble countless times as a child. I brought your favorite, lemon chiffon from Harriet's Bakery. Do you still like it? The gesture nearly broke my resolve. Such a small thing, remembering my favorite cake, but I had learned to protect my heart these past 9 years. Thank you, I said, not confirming or denying my continued affection for lemon chiffon. Would you like some tea? That would be nice. As I prepared the tea in the kitchen, my hands trembled slightly. What did he want? Why now? The question swirled in my mind like the loose tea leaves in the strainer. When I returned with the tea tray, Maxwell had removed his suit jacket and was examining a family photograph from when he was about 12, a skiing trip to Switzerland. All of us smiling, rosy-cheeked and happy. Good times, he said, replacing the frame carefully. Indeed, I replied, pouring the tea with practiced precision. And to what do I owe this unexpected visit, Maxwell? It's been 9 years without so much as a phone call. He had the grace to look somewhat ashamed, lowering his eyes to his teacup. I heard about Dad. I'm sorry I missed the funeral. It was in the papers. I sent you a message. I know. I should have come. I just couldn't face it. I took a sip of tea, using the moment to compose myself. And yet here you are now, a week after the estate has been settled. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing slightly. So it's true. Dad left everything to you. And there it was. The real reason for his visit. Cake and all. Yes, I said simply. Everything. Maxwell set down his cup with a slight clatter. Mom, I brought some papers. Legal documents. I think there's been a misunderstanding with Dad's will. I just need you to sign these to correct some things. He reached for the folder he had brought, opening it to reveal official-looking documents filled with legal jargon. What things exactly? I asked, not touching the papers he tried to slide toward me. Just some oversights. Dad always intended for me to have a portion of the company shares. These papers simply acknowledge that intention and transfer 20% to me. It's what he would have wanted. I almost laughed. Theodore had been crystal clear about his intentions. Maxwell would receive nothing directly, not because Theodore didn't love his son, but because he knew Maxwell too well. Is that why you're here? For money? No, Mom. I'm here to reconnect. I've missed you. He reached across and placed his hand over mine. I brought cake. I want us to be a family again. The touch of his hand, the sincerity in his voice. It was almost convincing. But I had not survived 67 years, including 42 years of marriage to a shrewd businessman, without developing some ability to see through deception. How interesting that your desire to reconnect coincides so perfectly with your father's death and his 18 million euro estate, I said, withdrawing my hand. 9 years, Maxwell. 9 years without a word. Did you think I would simply sign whatever you put in front of me because you brought cake? His expression hardened, the mask of filial devotion slipping. You don't understand business, Mom. Dad knew that. He wouldn't have wanted you to handle everything alone. I stood up, smoothing down my skirt with dignity. I believe this visit is over. It was enlightening to see you again, Maxwell. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice rising. I'm trying to help you. No, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions within. You're trying to help yourself. Your father knew that would be your first instinct, which is precisely why he left everything to me. Maxwell's face flushed with anger as he gathered his papers and jacket. You'll regret this. You can't manage all this on your own. You'll call me when you realize that. I walked him to the door, maintaining my composure until the very last moment. Goodbye, Maxwell. As the door closed behind him, I leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to fall, not for the money or the estate, but for the son I had lost long before today, perhaps even before those 9 years of silence began. The cake remained on the coffee table, a bitter reminder of false sweetness. I threw it away without taking a single bite. The following morning, I awoke with a determination that surprised even me. If Maxwell thought I was some helpless widow who couldn't manage without a man's guidance, he was sorely mistaken. Theodore may have been the business-minded one in our marriage, but I had been paying attention all those years. I called Arthur Peterson first thing. Arthur, I need a full briefing on Theodore's business holdings. Not the summary version you gave me. Everything. And I want to meet with the board of directors as soon as possible. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sophia, are you sure? Theodore always kept you somewhat removed from the business side of things. That was his choice, not mine. And things have changed. I own controlling interest now, and I intend to understand exactly what I own. Another pause. Maxwell contacted me last night. He seems to think there was some mistake with the will. I wasn't surprised. And what did you tell him? The truth. That Theodore was of sound mind and the will is ironclad. Good. Now, about that meeting. 3 days later, I found myself sitting at the head of a conference table in the downtown offices of Blackwood Enterprises, facing 12 men in expensive suits, all of whom had worked with Theodore for years. Some had known Maxwell since he was a boy. All looked surprised to see me there. Gentlemen, I began, channeling every ounce of confidence I could muster. Thank you for accommodating this meeting. As you know, Theodore's passing has left me as the majority shareholder of Blackwood Enterprises. I intend to take an active role in understanding and guiding this company's future. Richard Hargrove, the CFO, who had been with Theodore almost from the beginning, cleared his throat. Mrs. Blackwood, while we appreciate your interest, running a company of this size requires considerable experience and expertise. I'm aware, Mr. Hargrove. That's why I've spent the past 3 days reviewing every financial report, business plan, and strategic document from the last 5 years. I have questions, and I expect answers. The room fell silent. I opened the leather portfolio in front of me and began my inquiry. For the next 2 hours, I questioned decisions, challenged assumptions, and demonstrated that while I may not have been in the boardroom before, I had absorbed more than anyone realized from decades of dinner conversations with Theodore. By the end of the meeting, the initial condescension had given way to cautious respect. I wasn't Theodore, but I wasn't a pushover either. As the executives filed out, Richard stayed behind. And that was unexpected, he said, a new appraisal in his eyes. For you, perhaps, I replied, gathering my notes. Theodore and I talked about everything. Did you think I spent 42 years just nodding and smiling? A small smile played at his lips. No, I suppose not. Theodore always said you were the smartest person he knew. Did he? This surprised me. Theodore had been generous with his affection, but more reserved with his professional admiration. All the time. Said he ran everything by you first, even if you didn't know it, testing his ideas against your common sense. He called it. I felt a warm glow at this posthumous revelation. Thank you for telling me that, Richard. You should know, Mrs. Blackwood. Sophia. Maxwell has been contacting several board members, suggesting that perhaps you might be willing to sell your shares, or at least appoint him as your proxy. Of course he had. And what did you tell him? That he should speak to you directly, and that his father had made his wishes clear. I nodded, appreciating his loyalty. Theodore was right to trust you. As I left the office building that had borne my husband's name for 30 years, I felt a strange mixture of grief and empowerment. Theodore was gone, but he had left me with more than money and property. He had left me with an opportunity to discover strengths I hadn't known I possessed. Back at home, I was not entirely surprised to find Maxwell waiting in the driveway, leaning against his sleek sports car. The board meeting went well, I hear, he said as I approached. Quite the performance. It wasn't a performance, I replied, unlocking my front door. Would you like to come in? No papers this time? He hesitated, then followed me inside. The house was quiet, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, another reminder of Theodore, who had wound it faithfully every Sunday for decades. Why are you doing this? Maxwell asked, following me to the kitchen where I began preparing tea, a ritual that calmed me. You never cared about the business before. I cared about your father, I said, measuring loose tea into the pot. And he cared about the business. It was his life's work, and now it's my responsibility. It should be mine, Maxwell said, his voice tight with restrained anger. I'm his son. his only child. I turned to face him, really looking at my son for the first time since his return. Behind the anger and entitlement, I could see something else. Hurt. The hurt of a boy who had always felt he lived in his father's shadow. "And Maxwell," I said more gently, "your father loved you very much, but he was worried about your approach to money and business." "My approach?" His laugh was bitter. "You mean because I wanted to innovate, to take risks, to bring the company into the 21st century while he was still clinging to outdated business models?" "No," I said, pouring the tea. "Because you wanted to use the company as your personal cash machine without understanding its value beyond money." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "That's not fair." "Perhaps not, but it's why he left everything to me. Not because he trusted me more with business decisions, but because he trusted me more with his legacy." We sat at the kitchen table, the steam from our teacups rising between us like the ghosts of old arguments. "9 years, Maxwell," I said finally. "Why did you stay away so long?" He stared into his cup. Pride, at first, then inertia. It got harder to make that first call the longer I waited. And then Dad got sick, and I was afraid he'd reject me if I tried to come back. He never would have rejected you. Neither would I. But you're rejecting me now, aren't you? By keeping everything for yourself." I sighed. "I'm not keeping anything from you out of spite. I'm honoring your father's wishes while I figure out what to do next. This isn't just about money, Maxwell. It's about responsibility. And you don't think I'm responsible enough?" The question hung in the air between us, honest in a way our conversation hadn't been until now. "I don't know who you are anymore," I said truthfully. 9 years is a long time. The boy I knew is gone, and I haven't had the chance to know the man you've become." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of understanding, perhaps even regret. "Give me that chance then," he said, setting down his cup. "Let me show you who I am now. No papers, no requests for shares or money, just time together." I wanted to believe him. God help me. I wanted to so badly. But the memory of his earlier deception was still fresh. "I'd like that," I said cautiously. "But trust needs to be rebuilt, Maxwell. It doesn't happen overnight." He nodded, a humility in his demeanor that seemed genuine. "I understand. Can we start with dinner? Tomorrow night? I'll cook." The thought of my son cooking for me, something that had never happened in all the years before he left, brought an unexpected smile to my face. "You cook now?" A small, genuine smile appeared on his face. "I had to learn when I moved to San Francisco. Takeout gets old after a while." "Dinner tomorrow, then," I agreed. No business talk. As he left, I felt a cautious hope take root. Perhaps there was a path forward for us, even if it wasn't the one either of us had initially envisioned. But as I closed the door behind him, I couldn't shake the feeling that rebuilding our relationship would be far more complicated than a simple dinner could resolve. Maxwell arrived the next evening carrying grocery bags and wearing jeans instead of his usual business suit, looking more like the boy I remembered than the slick businessman who had appeared on my doorstep with manipulative intentions. "I thought I'd make Dad's famous risotto," he said, unloading fresh mushrooms, arborio rice, and a bottle of white wine onto my kitchen counter. "If that's okay." The mention of Theodore's signature dish, the one he prepared for every special occasion, caught me off guard. "You remember how to make it?" Maxwell nodded, washing his hands at the sink. "He taught me the summer before I went to college. Said every man should know how to cook at least one impressive dish." I hadn't known this. Another small piece of their relationship I'd apparently missed. It stung a little, but also warmed me to think of Theodore passing on this small tradition. "He'd be touched that you remembered," I said, taking a seat at the kitchen island to watch him work. As Maxwell chopped onions and measured rice, he began telling me about his life in San Francisco, his apartment overlooking the bay, his work developing investment algorithms for tech startups, the local farmers' market he visited every Sunday morning. "It sounds like you've built a good life," I observed, sipping the wine he had poured for me. "Parts of it are good," he agreed, stirring the risotto with the focused attention the dish demanded. "But something's always been missing." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical despite myself. "And what's that?" He glanced up, his eyes, so like his father's, meeting mine directly. "Family, roots, history, all the things I walked away from. You could have come back any time, Maxwell. I know that now," he said, returning his attention to the pot. But for a long time, I convinced myself you and Dad were better off without me, that I was doing fine on my own, proving something by staying away. And what were you proving? His stirring slowed. That I didn't need anyone, that I could succeed without Dad's money or connections, that I wasn't just Theodore Blackwood's son. There was a raw honesty in his voice that made me believe him, at least about this part of his struggle. Your father was proud of you, I said quietly. Even when he was angry, even when you were gone, he kept track of your career. He had a file of articles about your work. Maxwell looked up sharply. He did. I nodded. And in his study, second drawer of his desk. He never mentioned it, but I found it when I was sorting through his things. The risotto nearly burned while Maxwell processed this information, his eyes suspiciously bright. I took over the stirring while he composed himself. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. The risotto was almost as good as Theodore's, and the conversation flowed more easily than I had expected. We carefully avoided the topics of the inheritance and the business, focusing instead on memories and current events. After dinner, over coffee, Maxwell asked if he could see his father's study. I led him to the room that had been Theodore's sanctuary. The leather armchair still indented with the shape of his body, books still marked with his place, his reading glasses still on the desk as if he might return any moment to use them. Maxwell stood in the doorway for a long moment, as if afraid to enter. It's all right, I encouraged gently. He would want you to come in. Slowly, Maxwell approached the desk, running his fingers lightly over its polished surface. Everything's exactly the same. I haven't been able to change anything yet, I admitted. It still feels like his space. Maxwell nodded in understanding, then gestured to the desk drawer. The articles you mentioned. I opened the drawer and handed him the folder labeled simply Max. Inside were dozens of printouts, news articles about startups Maxwell had worked with, press releases announcing his promotions, even a profile piece from a tech magazine that had featured him 2 years ago. Maxwell sat heavily in his father's chair, paging through the evidence of his father's silent pride. I had no idea, he whispered. He wasn't very good at expressing his feelings, I said, perching on the edge of the desk. But he never stopped caring, Maxwell. Why didn't he reach out? All these years. For the same reason you didn't. Pride, hurt, the fear of rejection. I sighed, feeling the weight of years of miscommunication. You're more like him than either of you ever realized. Maxwell closed the folder carefully, reverently. I wish I'd known. I wish we'd had more time. So do I said, feeling the familiar ache of loss. But we can't change the past. We can only decide what to do with the present. He looked up at me, his expression open and vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child. I want to try again. Mom. Really try. Not for the money or the business, but for us, for Dad's memory. I wanted to believe him. But trust, once broken, is a delicate thing to rebuild. Actions speak louder than words, Maxwell, I said gently. Let's take it one day at a time. As he was leaving that night, he paused at the door. Can I come by on Sunday? Maybe help you with some things around the house. Dad always used to do the garden work, right? The thoughtfulness of the offer touched me. Sunday would be nice. The roses need pruning. After he left, I returned to Theodore's study and sat in his chair, surrounded by his things, imagining what he would advise me to do about our son. I'm trying to be careful, Theo, I whispered to the empty room. But I miss him. I miss our family. The house remained silent, offering no answers. But in my heart, I felt a cautious optimism taking root, fragile as a new spring shoot, but alive with possibility. Sunday arrived with perfect spring weather, warm sunshine tempered by a gentle breeze. Maxwell appeared mid-morning, wearing work clothes and carrying gardening gloves. I stopped by the garden center, he explained, nodding toward several bags of mulch and fertilizer in the trunk of his car. The clerk helped me figure out what the roses might need. The thoughtfulness of this gesture, not just offering help, but preparing properly, gave me hope that perhaps his intentions were genuine this time. We spent the morning working side by side in Theodore's rose garden. Maxwell was clumsy at first, uncertain about how to properly prune the delicate bushes. Like this, I demonstrated, making a clean cut at a 45-degree angle just above an outward-facing bud. Your father was meticulous about his technique. I remember him out here every weekend, Maxwell said, carefully mimicking my example. I used to think it was boring, watching plants grow. And now, He surveyed the garden thoughtfully. Now I understand the appeal. Creating something beautiful through patience and care. Seeing the results of consistent attention. His words could have applied equally to parenting, to marriage, to all the relationships that require tending. I wondered if he realized the parallel. After several hours of work, we broke for lunch on the patio, admiring our efforts. The rose garden looked refreshed, ready for the season's new growth. "You're good at this," Maxwell remarked, gesturing at the garden. "I always thought it was Dad's domain." "We shared it," I explained. "He did the heavy work, pruning, fertilizing, pest control. I did the design, which varieties to plant where, color combinations, overall layout. A partnership," he said thoughtfully. "That's what marriage is, at its best. Different strengths coming together." He was quiet for a moment, picking at his sandwich. "I never understood your relationship with Dad. As a kid, he seemed so dominant. I thought you just went along with whatever he wanted." The misconception surprised me. "Is that why you got so angry when I agreed with him about not funding your business venture? You thought I was just following his lead?" Maxwell nodded. "I always thought if Dad said no, you'd say no too, that you didn't have your own opinion." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, surprised sound. "Oh, Maxwell, your father and I had plenty of disagreements over the years, but we had them in private. We presented a united front to you because that's what parents do. So you actually agreed with him about my business idea. You weren't just backing him up." I met his eyes directly. "I thought it was too risky, yes. Not because I didn't believe in your abilities, but because the business model itself was flawed. The market research was insufficient, the profit projections were overly optimistic, and the exit strategy was nebulous at best." Maxwell stared at me, clearly shocked by my detailed assessment. "How did you know all that?" "Dad said almost the exact same things, because we discussed it thoroughly before giving you our answer. I read your entire proposal, twice." "I had no idea," he said, shaking his head. I always thought that I was just the supportive wife with no head for business." I finished for him. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Something like that. "I'm sorry. Your father valued my opinion, Maxwell, on everything from business decisions to which tie to wear with which suit. We were partners in every sense of the word." This revelation seemed to shift something in Maxwell's perception. He studied me with new eyes, reassessing years of family dynamics through this different lens. "Is that why he left everything to you? Because he trusted your judgment?" "Partly," I acknowledged, "but also because he knew you weren't ready. Not because you lack intelligence or ability, but because you hadn't yet learned the lessons he thought were important." "What lessons?" There was no defensiveness in his question, only genuine curiosity. "That wealth is a responsibility, not just a privilege. That business is about relationships and trust, not just profit. That some things are worth more than money, like family, integrity, legacy." Maxwell was quiet for a long time, absorbing these words. Finally, he asked, "Do you think I'll ever learn those lessons?" The vulnerability in his question touched me. "I think you're already starting to," I said honestly. "Coming here today, helping with the garden, listening instead of arguing, these are all signs of growth." After lunch, we continued working in the garden, but our conversation had shifted to lighter topics. Books we'd read recently, movies we'd enjoyed, places we'd traveled. It felt almost normal, this mother-son interaction that had been absent from my life for so long. As the afternoon light began to fade, Maxwell stood, stretching his back. "I should probably head out. I've got an early meeting tomorrow." "Thank you for your help today," I said, genuinely grateful. "The garden looks wonderful." He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I enjoyed it. Maybe we could make this a regular thing. Sunday gardening?" The suggestion warmed my heart. "But I'd like that very much." As he gathered his things, Maxwell hesitated, then asked, "Would it be okay if I took a look at those articles Dad kept? Made copies of them, maybe. Of course, they're yours, really. He saved them for you." I led him back to the study and handed him the folder. While he leafed through it again, I noticed him glancing around the room, taking in the details of Theodore's space more thoroughly than during his previous visit. "He lived here," Maxwell said softly, more to himself than to me. "Really lived. His books, his notes, his everything." "Yes," I agreed, understanding his meaning. Theodore's presence was palpable in this room. In the worn leather of his chair, the half-filled notebook on his desk, the reading glasses still waiting for eyes that would never use them again. I missed so much, Maxwell said, his voice thick with regret. 9 years. I can't get them back. I placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension there. No, you can't. But you're here now. That counts for something. He turned to me then, eyes suspiciously bright. Does it? After what I tried to do when I first came back, trying to trick you into signing those papers? The direct acknowledgement of his deception surprised me. You remember what your father used to say about mistakes? Maxwell smiled faintly. It's not the mistake that defines you, but what you do after you make it. Exactly, I said, squeezing his shoulder gently. You're trying to make amends. That matters. As I walked him to the door, Maxwell turned to me with an unexpected question. Mom, would you consider coming to San Francisco sometime? To see where I live, meet my friends? The invitation caught me off guard. You'd want me to visit. Yes, he said, seeming surprised by his own suggestion. I think I'd like to show you my life there, if you're interested. In that moment, he looked so much like the earnest little boy who used to beg me to come see his science projects, his baseball games, his world. My heart constricted with a mixture of joy and caution. I'd like that, I said. Let's plan something. After Maxwell left, I returned to the garden, touching the newly pruned roses with gentle fingers. New growth would come soon, fresh buds emerging from what looked like barren branches. Perhaps the same could be true for us. New relationship growing from what had seemed irreparably broken. But as I went inside and past Theodore's study, a nagging doubt remained. Maxwell had changed, or at least seemed to be changing. But the memory of those legal papers, the attempted deception, still lingered. Trust, like Theodore's roses, would need time and careful tending to fully bloom again. 2 weeks of Sunday gardening sessions passed, each one more comfortable than the last. Maxwell and I established a rhythm, working together in the morning, sharing lunch, then spending the afternoon on other projects around the house, cleaning gutters, organizing Theodore's book collection, sorting through decades of accumulated possessions. Through these shared tasks, conversation flowed more naturally. I learned about Maxwell's life in San Francisco, not just the superficial details, but the meaningful aspects. His volunteer work with a coding program for underprivileged youth, his friendship with an elderly neighbor whom he helped with groceries and home repairs, the stray cat he'd adopted despite his building's no pets policy. Small stories that revealed character, showing me glimpses of the man my son had become during our years apart. In turn, I shared with him the parts of my life he had missed. The book club I'd joined after he left, the watercolor painting classes Theodore had encouraged me to take, my work with the hospital auxiliary where Theodore had been treated during his illness. You've built a full life, Maxwell observed as we sorted through photo albums one rainy Sunday. I always pictured you just waiting for me to call, I guess. That was self-centered of me. I missed you every day, I said honestly. But, yes, life continued. It has to. He nodded, turning the page of the album to reveal photos from the year after he left. Theodore and I on a trip to Italy, smiling despite the family fracture we were both feeling. Dad looks happy here, he said, touching the photo lightly. We had good moments, even in our sadness, I explained. Sarah, we learned to find joy where we could. It was either that or be consumed by what we couldn't change. Maxwell considered this. That's a kind of strength, isn't it? Finding joy despite loss. One of the most important kinds, I agreed. During these weeks, Maxwell never mentioned the inheritance or the business. He attended no more board meetings, made no more attempts to involve himself in company matters. His focus seemed entirely on rebuilding our relationship, which both relieved and somewhat puzzled me. One evening, after we'd finished dinner at a small local restaurant, another new tradition we'd established, Maxwell brought up an unexpected topic. I've been thinking about that trip to San Francisco we discussed, he said, stirring his coffee. How about next month? The weather is perfect in May. The prospect both excited and intimidated me. I hadn't traveled since Theodore's diagnosis 2 years ago. I'd need to make arrangements, I said cautiously. For the house, for Theodore's roses. Maxwell smiled. I can help with all that, and it would only be for a week or so. I thought I could show you around, introduce you to my friends. Maybe you could even meet Jeremy. Jeremy. This was a name I hadn't heard before. A slight flush colored Maxwell's cheeks. My partner. We've been together for about 3 years now. He's a pediatric surgeon at UCSF Medical Center. I nearly dropped my coffee cup. You're in a serious relationship. For 3 years. Maxwell nodded, looking both nervous and relieved to have shared this information. I wanted to tell you and Dad so many times, but after so long without contact, it just never seemed like the right moment. Tell me about him, I said, trying to process this revelation. My son had built a life that included a long-term partner, a whole dimension of his existence I knew nothing about. Maxwell's face softened as he spoke. Jeremy's brilliant, dedicated, works too hard, but loves what he does. He's from Minnesota originally, comes from a big family, 4 sisters. He keeps trying to teach me to cook properly beyond Dad's risotto, and he's been encouraging me to reconnect with you for years. He sounds wonderful, I said sincerely. I'd very much like to meet him. He wants to meet you too. He's heard all my stories about growing up, about you and Dad. I wondered what those stories entailed, what version of me existed in Jeremy's mind based on Maxwell's recollections. Both the good and the bad, Maxwell added, as if reading my thoughts. I haven't painted you as a villain, Mom. Even when I was angriest, I knew the truth was more complicated than that. The conversation shifted something fundamental between us. Maxwell had shared a deeply personal part of his life, not because he had to, but because he wanted me to know. It felt like a genuine gesture of trust. I'd love to come to San Francisco, I said decisively. Let's plan for next month. Maxwell's smile was worth any anxiety the prospect of travel might cause me. Great. I'll book your flight. Jeremy's already talking about all the places he wants to take you. As we drove home, I found myself thinking about Theodore, how he would have reacted to learning about Jeremy, how much he would have wanted to meet the man who made our son happy. Another loss in the ledger of his too early departure. Dad would have liked Jeremy, I think, Maxwell said suddenly, again seeming to track my thoughts. They're both methodical, detail-oriented, both love classical music. He would have been happy for you, I agreed. All he ever wanted was for you to find fulfillment, in work, in relationships, in life. I wish I'd understood that sooner, Maxwell said quietly. I spent so long thinking he just wanted me to follow in his footsteps, to be a carbon copy of him. He wanted you to be successful on your own terms, I clarified. He just worried about your impulsiveness sometimes, your tendency to chase the next exciting thing without fully thinking it through. Maxwell chuckled ruefully. He wasn't wrong about that. I've learned some hard lessons over the years. We all do, I said. Nah, that's how we grow. Back at home, as Maxwell was preparing to leave, he paused at the door. Mom, there's something else I want to ask you. The sudden seriousness in his tone made me wary. Yes. Would you consider letting me look at Dad's business records? Not the confidential company documents, just his personal notes, his thinking about the business. I'm not asking for control or ownership, he added quickly. I just want to understand him better, how he built what he built, what mattered to him about it. I studied my son's face, searching for any hint of the manipulation I'd seen during his first visit. Instead, I saw only genuine curiosity, and perhaps a desire for connection with his father, even posthumously. I think that would be fine, I said carefully. Most of his personal papers are in the filing cabinets in his study. You're welcome to look through them when you have time. Thank you, he said, relief evident in his voice. I appreciate your trust. After he left, I sat in the quiet living room, contemplating this new development. Was Maxwell truly interested in understanding his father's business philosophy, or was this the beginning of a more subtle approach to claiming what he believed should be his? I wanted to believe the former, but caution still whispered in my ear. Theodore had always said that when it came to business matters, trust should be extended carefully and verified thoroughly. With that advice in mind, I made a mental note to review Theodore's personal files myself before Maxwell's next visit, not to hide anything, but to ensure I was fully informed about what they contained. The next day, I spent hours in Theodore's study, methodically going through the filing cabinets. The documents told the story of a man who approached business with both sharp acumen and surprising compassion. Notes about employees, family situations alongside profit projections, Reflections on Ethical Dilemmas next to Expansion Strategies. Among the files, I found a folder labeled simply Maxwell. Inside was not just the collection of articles about our son's career, but letters Theodore had written to Maxwell over the years, letters that had never been sent. The most recent was dated just a month before Theodore's death. My dear son, the doctors tell me my time is growing short, and there are things I need to say to you. I've made many mistakes in my life, but none weigh on me more heavily than the rift between us. I was too rigid, too convinced I knew what was best for you. I see now that I should have listened more and directed less. I've followed your career with immense pride. You've blazed your own trail, just as I did when I was young, though I somehow forgot that part of myself when it came to raising you. I'm leaving everything to your mother, not because I don't trust you, but because I trust her to bridge the gap between us, even after I'm gone. She has a wisdom I've always lacked when it comes to matters of the heart. I hope someday you'll understand that everything I did, even the mistakes, came from love. Your father, Theodore. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. Theodore had never shared these thoughts with me. His regret, his hope for reconciliation. Perhaps he hadn't wanted to burden me, or perhaps he'd simply run out of time. I carefully returned the letter to its folder, deciding that these particular documents should be shared with Maxwell at the right moment. Not now, when our reconnection was still fragile, but when I felt certain his return to my life was genuine and lasting. The following Sunday, Maxwell arrived with a small potted tree in his arms. A Japanese maple, he explained as I opened the door. I thought it might look nice near Dad's roses, kind of a continuation of the garden. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. A new planting, a living thing that would grow and develop over years to come. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely touched. Let's find the perfect spot for it. As we worked together to plant the tree, I found myself studying my son with new eyes, seeing both the boy he had been and the man he had become, with all the complexity that entailed. Trust was still a work in progress between us, but like the maple sapling we were carefully settling into the ground, it had the potential to grow into something strong and enduring. There, Maxwell said, standing back to admire our work. What do you think? I think it's a wonderful addition, I replied, meaning much more than just the tree. The weeks leading up to my San Francisco trip passed quickly. Maxwell continued his Sunday visits, now spending time in Theodore's study reviewing his father's business notes and journals. I observed this process from a distance, offering context or clarification when asked, but otherwise allowing Maxwell to discover Theodore's business philosophy on his own terms. Sometimes I would find him completely absorbed, making his own notes as he read, an expression of concentration on his face that reminded me startlingly of his father. It's remarkable, he said one afternoon, looking up from a journal documenting the early days of Blackwood Enterprises. Dad was so methodical, so strategic. Even when taking risks, he calculated everything. That was his nature, I agreed. He believed in bold moves, but never reckless ones. I'm starting to understand why he turned down my business proposal, Maxwell admitted, reading his thoughts on sustainable growth, proper capitalization. My plan violated practically every principle he believed in. This acknowledgement, offered freely, without prompting, felt like a significant step forward. He wanted to protect you, I said, not just financially, but from the pain of a venture he truly believed would fail. Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. I see that now. At the time, I just felt rejected. We often don't understand our parents' motivations until we've gained more life experience ourselves, I observed. Sometimes not even then. The day before my scheduled flight to San Francisco, Maxwell arrived to help me pack and to finalize arrangements for the house during my absence. Richard Hargrove had kindly offered to check on things and tend to Theodore's roses, another unexpected friendship that had developed in the months since my husband's passing. Jeremy's so excited to meet you, Maxwell said as he carried my suitcase downstairs. He's taken 3 days off work to show you around. I hope I'm not imposing, I worried aloud. 3 days is a lot for a busy surgeon. Maxwell smiled. Trust me, he insisted. He's been after me to reconnect with you for years. He says family is too important to throw away over old disagreements. He sounds very wise, I said, feeling a rush of gratitude toward this man I had yet to meet. He is, Maxwell agreed. Much wiser than me in many ways. He's been good for me, Mom. Helped me grow up, I guess. The admission was touching in its humility, another sign of the maturation that seemed to be occurring in my son. That evening, after Maxwell left to prepare for my arrival the next day, I sat in Theodore's study, feeling his presence strongly as I often did in that room. "I'm going to San Francisco tomorrow, Theo," I said aloud, finding comfort in speaking to him as if he could hear. "And to see Maxwell, to meet Jeremy. I wish you were coming with me." The room remained silent, of course, but I felt a sense of peace nonetheless. Theodore would have wanted this, our family finding its way back to each other, even if the path was complicated and the outcome uncertain. The flight to San Francisco the next day was uneventful, though flying alone felt strange after decades of traveling with Theodore. Maxwell met me at the airport, his face lighting up when he spotted me emerging from the security area. "Mom!" he called, waving enthusiastically. The genuine joy in his expression warmed my heart. The drive from the airport to Maxwell's apartment offered glimpses of the city's famous hills, the bay glittering in the distance under perfect blue skies. "Das it's beautiful," I commented, understanding why someone might fall in love with this place. "Wait until you see the view from our apartment," Maxwell said proudly. "On clear days like this, you can see all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge." The hour didn't escape my notice, the first time Maxwell had explicitly referenced sharing his home with Jeremy. The apartment was in a renovated Victorian building, in a neighborhood Maxwell identified as No Valley. As we climbed the stairs to the second floor, the door opened before Maxwell could use his key. A tall man with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair stood in the doorway, his smile warm and welcoming. "You must be Sophia," he said, stepping forward to take my hand. "I'm Jeremy." "It's so wonderful to finally meet you." There was such genuine warmth in his greeting that I felt instantly at ease. "The pleasure is mine," I replied. "I've heard wonderful things about you. All exaggerations, I'm sure," he said with a self-deprecating laugh. "Please, come in. You must be tired after your flight." The apartment was beautiful, open and airy, with large windows that indeed showcased a spectacular view of the city. The decor reflected both taste and comfort. Quality furniture arranged for conversation, bookshelves filled with an eclectic mix of medical texts and classic literature, photographs and artwork adorning the walls. One photo in particular caught my eye. Maxwell and Jeremy on what appeared to be a hiking trail, arms around each other's shoulders, faces bright with happiness. "That was taken in Muir Woods last year," Jeremy explained, noticing my attention. "One of my favorite places." "You look very happy," I said simply. "We are," Jeremy replied, glancing at Maxwell with obvious affection. "Most of the time, anyway. Your son can be stubborn occasionally. A family trait, I'm afraid," I admitted with a smile. Jeremy laughed. "I suspected as much. Maxwell speaks so much about both you and his father. I feel like I know you already." The ease of Jeremy's manner helped dissolve any initial awkwardness. By the time we sat down to the dinner he had prepared, a delicious roast chicken with herbs and vegetables, conversation was flowing naturally. "Maxwell tells me you've been encouraging him to reconnect with me for some time," I said to Jeremy as we enjoyed the meal. "Family is precious," Jeremy replied simply. "I have 4 sisters and more cousins than I can count. We drive each other crazy sometimes, but we're always there for each other. I couldn't imagine cutting any of them out of my life. It was different with us," Maxwell interjected. "The argument, Dad's disapproval of my business plans. Every family has conflicts," Jeremy countered gently. "It's how you resolve them that matters." I liked him immensely in that moment, his perspective, his quiet wisdom. After dinner, Maxwell insisted on cleaning up while Jeremy showed me to the guest room, a small but comfortable space with its own bathroom and a vase of fresh flowers on the dresser. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," Jeremy said. "We're so glad you came. It means a lot to Maxwell, though he might not say it directly." "Thank you for welcoming me," I replied, "and for being good to my son." Jeremy's expression softened. "He's easy to love, once you get past the stubborn exterior, and he loves you very much, Sophia." Even during all those years of silence, the simple statement brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I've missed him terribly." "I know," Jeremy said kindly. "He missed you too, though it took him a long time to admit it. Pride can be a formidable barrier." "Another family trait," I acknowledged with a rueful smile. That night, lying in the comfortable guest bed, I reflected on the day's events. The Maxwell I was seeing here, in his own environment, with the partner who clearly brought out the best in him, was perhaps the most authentic version of my son I had seen in decades. Relaxed, thoughtful, capable of both giving and receiving love. It gave me hope that our reconciliation might be genuine after all, not motivated by inheritance or business interests, but by the fundamental human need for family connection. The next few days were filled with explorations of the city Maxwell now called home. He and Jeremy proved excellent guides, showing me famous landmarks and hidden local treasures alike. We rode a cable car up steep hills, visited the magnificent Golden Gate Park, and spent an afternoon at the De Young Museum admiring art from around the world. Throughout these outings, I observed the easy rapport between Maxwell and Jeremy, the small touches, the inside jokes, the way they anticipated each other's needs. They had built a solid partnership, one based on mutual respect and genuine affection. On my third evening in San Francisco, Jeremy was called to the hospital for an emergency surgery, leaving Maxwell and me to have dinner alone at a small Italian restaurant near their apartment. "Jeremy's wonderful," I said as we settled at our table. "I can see why you love him." Maxwell smiled, a mixture of pride and happiness in his expression. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me. Made me a better person." "How did you meet?" "At a hospital fundraiser, actually. I was there representing a tech company that was donating equipment. He was one of the doctors being honored for his work with underprivileged children. He called me out on some exaggerated claims our marketing department had made about the equipment." Maxwell laughed at the memory. "Most people just nod and smile at those events. Not Jeremy. He asked detailed technical questions I couldn't answer." "I can see why that would appeal to you," I observed. "You've never respected people who just tell you what you want to hear." "He challenged me," Maxwell agreed. "Still does, but always with kindness behind it." After our meals arrived, Maxwell grew more serious. "Mom, there's something I want to talk to you about." The shift in his tone made me wary. "Yes, I've been thinking a lot about Dad's business, about the inheritance situation." He held up a hand as he saw my expression change. "Not what you're thinking. I've been reading Dad's journals, his notes. I understand his decisions better now." I waited, curious about where this was heading. "I don't want to take over Blackwood Enterprises," Maxwell continued. "I don't want to contest the will or push for shares or any of that. That's not my path." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by surprise. "What changed your mind?" Reading Dad's thoughts about the business helped me see how much it meant to him, not just as a financial enterprise, but as a legacy of values. His approach is so different from mine. Maxwell twirled pasta around his fork thoughtfully. "I'm good at what I do in the tech world. I like the fast pace, the innovation, the disruption. Dad built something enduring, stable, relationship-based. Those are different skills, different temperaments." "Yes, they are," I agreed, impressed by this self-awareness. "But," Maxwell continued, meeting my eyes directly, "I would like to be involved in the foundation." "The foundation?" I repeated, momentarily confused. "The Theodore Blackwood Foundation. The one you're establishing with part of the inheritance. Jeremy mentioned you'd talked about it during your museum visit yesterday." I nodded, remembering the conversation. During our tour of the De Young, I'd mentioned to Jeremy my plans to use a significant portion of Theodore's estate to establish a foundation focused on educational opportunities for underprivileged youth, something Theodore and I had discussed during his illness but never formalized. "I think it's a wonderful idea," Maxwell said earnestly, "and it's something I could contribute to meaningfully, not with money, but with time, expertise, connections in the tech education world, if you'd be open to that." The request took me by surprise, not because it was unwelcome, but because it represented such a different approach from his initial attempt to claim a portion of the business. "I would welcome your involvement," I said sincerely. "The foundation is still in the planning stages, but your perspective would be valuable." Maxwell's face lit up. "Really? You mean that?" "Of course. Your work with coding programs for underprivileged youth gives you insight I don't have. And it would be nice to work on something together. A new kind of partnership," Maxwell suggested. Different from what you and Dad had, but meaningful in its own way." "Exactly," I agreed, feeling a surge of optimism about our future relationship. As we finished our meal and walked back to the apartment under a sky painted with the pinks and purples of sunset, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since before Theodore's illness. Not because all problems were solved or all hurts healed, but because we were moving forward with honesty and mutual respect. Back at the apartment, Maxwell showed me a photo album I hadn't noticed before. Pictures of his life in San Francisco over the past 9 years. Hiking trips with Jeremy, holidays with Jeremy's large family, community events, professional milestones. "I should have shared all this with you and Dad," he said quietly as we turned the pages. "So many moments lost." "Not lost," I corrected gently. "Just delayed in the sharing. We're doing that now." Maxwell's smile was tinged with both sadness and hope. "Better late than never, right?" "Much better," I agreed, squeezing his hand. My week in San Francisco passed too quickly. By the time Maxwell drove me to the airport for my flight home, I felt I had gained not just renewed connection with my son, but a new friend in Jeremy, and a broader understanding of the life Maxwell had built for himself. This visit meant a lot to me. "Mom," Maxwell said as we waited at the departure gate, "having you here, showing you my life, it feels like closing a circle somehow." "I feel the same," I replied. "Thank you for inviting me, and please thank Jeremy again for his hospitality. He already made me promise we'll visit you next time, maybe for Thanksgiving." The prospect of hosting them for a holiday, of having family around the table again, filled me with unexpected joy. "I'd love that. The house has been too quiet during holidays." As my boarding group was called, Maxwell hugged me tightly. "I'll see you Sunday for our regular gardening session," he promised. The Japanese maple needs checking. The normalcy of this statement, the assumption of continued regular contact, warmed me. I'll look forward to it. During the flight home, I reflected on the transformation that had occurred over the past months. From Maxwell's initial manipulative appearance on my doorstep to this genuine reconnection, it was more than I had dared hope for after 9 years of silence. Yet caution still whispered in my mind. People could change, yes, but rarely completely. The Maxwell who had tried to trick me into signing away Theodore's legacy was still part of the man who had just hugged me goodbye. Time would tell which aspect of his nature would ultimately prevail. Back home, the house felt emptier than usual after the vibrant energy of San Francisco and the constant company of Maxwell and Jeremy. I wandered from room to room, reacquainting myself with the space that had been mine and Theodore's for so many years. In Theodore's study, I found myself drawn to the drawer containing his unsent letters to Maxwell. After some consideration, I decided the time had come to share them with our son. Not all at once, perhaps, but beginning with the final letter Theodore had written before his death. When Maxwell arrived that Sunday, true to his promise, I noticed a new openness in his demeanor, as if allowing me into his San Francisco life had removed a barrier between us. After our usual gardening session, I invited him into Theodore's study. "There's something I want to share with you," I said, opening the drawer and retrieving the folder of letters. "Something I found while going through your father's papers." Maxwell took the folder with a questioning look. When he saw the contents, letters addressed to him in Theodore's distinctive handwriting, his expression shifted to one of shock. "These are for me, from Dad," I nodded. "He wrote to you over the years, even though he never sent them. I think he was working up the courage, especially toward the end." Maxwell's hands trembled slightly as he opened the most recent letter, the one written just a month before Theodore's death. As he read, tears filled his eyes. "He was proud of me," he whispered, as if trying to convince himself. "He actually said he was proud." "Of course he was," I confirmed gently. "He followed your career closely, celebrated your successes. He just didn't know how to bridge the gap after it grew so wide." Maxwell read the letter again, absorbing every word. "He says he made mistakes too, that he should have listened more. Your father was many things, but never too proud to acknowledge his imperfections, at least in private, and he left everything to you because he trusted you to bridge the gap between us." Maxwell looked up, seeking confirmation. "That appears to have been part of his thinking," I acknowledged, though I didn't know that until I found these letters. Maxwell carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. "There are more, several, written over the years. You can take them all if you'd like. They belong to you." He shook his head slowly. "Not yet. I think I need to digest this one first. Maybe read the others over time." His restraint surprised me. The Maxwell of old would have demanded everything immediately. This measured response seemed another indication of his growth. "Whatever you think best," I agreed. "They'll be here when you're ready." After Maxwell left that evening, taking only Theodore's final letter with him. I felt both hope and uncertainty. The letter had clearly moved him deeply, but how would it affect our fragile reconciliation? Would it strengthen our new bond, or complicate it with renewed grief and regret? The answer began to emerge the following week, when Maxwell called midweek, something he had never done since reappearing in my life. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said without preamble. "About Dad's letter, about the foundation we discussed, about everything really." "Yes," I prompted when he paused. "I'd like to get more involved in setting up the foundation, not just as an advisor or volunteer, but as a partner, with you." His words came quickly now, as if he'd rehearsed them. "I have ideas about structure, focus areas, technology integration that could multiply its impact. Would you be open to meeting with some experts I know in the nonprofit sector?" The enthusiasm in his voice was reminiscent of the passionate boy he had once been, before disappointment and resentment had hardened him. Yet this wasn't the impulsive excitement of youth. There was thoughtfulness behind it, consideration. "I would," I said, making a decision to trust this new direction. "When were you thinking?" "I could bring some people to town next weekend. We could have an informal strategy session at the house if that works for you." And so began a new chapter in our relationship, one built around a shared purpose that honored Theodore while allowing both Maxwell and me to contribute our unique strengths. The meeting Maxwell arranged brought together an impressive group: the director of a successful educational foundation from Boston, a technology specialist who had implemented digital learning platforms in underserved communities, an attorney specializing in nonprofit law, and Jeremy, who flew in specifically for the weekend, bringing his expertise in medical outreach programs. Watching Maxwell during that weekend, seeing his strategic thinking, his ability to synthesize diverse perspectives, his genuine passion for creating educational opportunities, I glimpsed what Theodore might have seen when he worried about our son's business proposal years ago. Not a lack of capability, but untapped potential being channeled in the wrong direction. "Hey, you're very good at this," I commented as we cleared away coffee cups after the first day's session. "Building consensus, keeping everyone focused on concrete outcomes." Maxwell seemed pleased by the observation. "I've learned a lot over the years, made plenty of mistakes, but they've been educational." "The best ones always are," I agreed. By the end of the weekend, we had a clear framework for the Theodore Blackwood Foundation: mission, structure, focus areas, and next steps. Maxwell had volunteered to lead the technology integration aspects, while I would oversee the financial and community partnership elements. As our guests departed on Sunday evening, Jeremy pulled me aside for a private word. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that I've never seen Maxwell as engaged or fulfilled as he's been working on this foundation concept. It connects him to his father in a way nothing else has." "I've noticed that too," I replied. "It's as if he's finding a way to have the conversation with Theodore that they never got to have in person." Jeremy nodded. "Exactly. And working with you. That's healing something in him I've watched him struggle with for years." His insights touched me deeply. "Thank you for helping him find his way back," I said. "I know your influence has been significant." Jeremy smiled warmly. He found his own way. I just reminded him of what was important from time to time. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat in Theodore's study, imagining what he would think of the weekend's developments. "We're doing it, Theo," I said to the empty room, "building something meaningful together, Maxwell and I. Different from what you might have envisioned, but perhaps better in some ways." The silence that answered me felt somehow approving, as if Theodore's presence lingered just beyond perception, witnessing our family's healing with satisfaction. Over the next several months, the foundation took shape alongside our strengthening relationship. Maxwell began spending 3 or 4 days every other week in town, dividing his time between foundation work and his ongoing responsibilities in San Francisco. Jeremy joined him when his surgical schedule permitted, becoming a welcome presence in my home and life. During this period, Maxwell gradually read through the remaining letters Theodore had written to him, sometimes sharing his thoughts about them, other times processing them privately. Each one seemed to fill in another piece of the puzzle that had been their complicated father-son relationship. One evening, as we reviewed potential grant criteria for the Foundation's first funding cycle, Maxwell looked up from his laptop with an expression of sudden realization. "You know what I've been thinking about lately?" he asked. "What's that?" How differently things might have turned out if I'd actually succeeded in getting you to sign those papers when I first showed up. If I'd gotten what I thought I wanted. The frank acknowledgement of his initial deception, something we rarely reference directly, surprised me. How do you think things would have differed? I asked carefully. Maxwell closed his laptop, giving the question his full attention. I would have gotten some money, some shares. Probably would have tried to exert influence over the company despite lacking Dad's experience or perspective. Most likely would have made a mess of things. His honesty was disarming. But more importantly, he continued, we wouldn't have had this. He gestured between us. The real relationship we've built. The foundation. The chance to understand Dad better through his writings and work. I would have missed all of that, focused only on what I thought was my rightful inheritance. And now, I prompted, now I see that my real inheritance isn't monetary at all. It's Dad's values, his approach to building something meaningful, his emphasis on integrity, things I nearly missed completely. He smiled ruefully. Plus, working together on the foundation is much more fulfilling than battling over company shares would have been. In that moment, I knew that Theodore's hopes, expressed in his final letter to our son, were being realized. Maxwell was indeed learning the lessons his father had wanted to impart, not through direct instruction but through experience and reflection. Your father would be very proud of you now, I said softly. I hope so, Maxwell replied. I'm trying to be someone he would respect. You already are, I assured him. As the first anniversary of Theodore's death approached, Maxwell suggested we mark the occasion by officially launching the foundation, not with a gala or public event, but with the announcement of our first round of educational grants to deserving students. Dad always preferred substance over show, Maxwell explained. This seems like the right way to honor him. I agreed wholeheartedly. Together, we selected 10 promising students from underprivileged backgrounds to receive comprehensive scholarships, covering not just tuition but mentoring, technology resources, and living stipends, the kind of holistic support that could truly transform lives. On the anniversary itself, Maxwell, Jeremy, and I visited Theodore's grave together, placing his favorite white roses beside the headstone. I wish you could see what we've built, Dad, Maxwell said quietly as we stood there. I think you would approve. Later that day, we sent the official notifications to our scholarship recipients. Reading their applications had been both humbling and inspiring. Young people overcoming tremendous obstacles in pursuit of education and growth. This is just the beginning, Maxwell said, as we sealed the last envelope. And the foundation can grow, expand its impact year after year. I watched my son, this complex, evolving man who had returned to my life under false pretenses, but had found his way to authentic purpose, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Theodore would say that's the best kind of legacy, I observed. One that keeps growing and adapting long after we're gone. Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. And I think I finally understand what he meant about wealth being a responsibility, not just a privilege. It's about what you do with it that matters. In that statement, I heard the lesson Theodore had most wanted our son to learn, the wisdom he had hoped Maxwell would someday embrace. The journey hadn't been straight or simple. There had been false starts, missteps, painful confrontations. But standing there with Maxwell, witnessing his genuine growth and commitment, I knew we had found our way to something true and lasting. Not perfect, nothing human ever is, but real. And in the end, that was worth more than all the inheritance in the world.